Welcome to Through My Eyes, our series of interviews with Vietnam veterans. Back in 2019, I did a series of interviews with Little Falls Vietnam veterans. We did 13 of those until we were interrupted by COVID. I had hoped to restart it, but one thing led to another, and it just never happened. Very recently, I reviewed some of those interviews, and I was very pleased to see that on average they got about 10,000 views. So I thought, let's restart this thing. So I'm very happy to kick this off again with a name that you're probably familiar with, and that's Jim Walczak, who was a registered physical therapist here in the Valley for many years. He helped a lot of people, including me. So, Jim, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate your service.
Thank you for inviting me and having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know this is not always an easy thing to talk about, so I was really pleased when you agreed to do this. I think it's important. So what I usually like to do, I always start off with at the end of your high school, when you graduated in 1965, but you didn't enlist until 1966. What was going on in that period in between there?
Well, I was actually waiting to enlist in the Marine Corps. I was only 17, and my mother wouldn't sign the papers for me. So I waited till I was 18, which was in September of 65, and then went through the process of going through the enlistment period and everything. And then in 1966, I went to boot camp in Parris Island. But prior to that, just as a note of interest, people always ask me, why did you join the Marine Corps? And when I was a freshman in high school, we had a earth science teacher, Robert Dickey, and he was a Korean War veteran. And in our class, when he was describing a water table one day, he related to the Korean War and the hills and the foxholes. And I'll never forget, he says, "Okay, ladies, you can go to sleep, you men listen up." And from that point on, that's all I ever wanted to do through my whole high school career was join the Marine Corps.
Interesting. So by joining the Marines, you had to have known that you were probably a 99.9% chance that you were going to end up in Vietnam.
Yes.
So you were thinking about that, and that didn't bother you, knowing that you were going to go to war?
No, because I really didn't think about war. I was taking like one step at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think subconsciously I knew that by going in the Marine Corps, because being a Marine, you're the best, but we're all the best, all the branches of the service. So I wasn't, I really didn't think about the war. I just took it one step at a time and went from there.
Okay. Where did you actually enlist? Herkimer, Ilion?
Herkimer.
In Herkimer.
Herkimer.
You mentioned to me that you went in a buddy system.
Right.
How did that work out?
Interesting story. My next door neighbor, Ronnie D'Ambrosio, he was 18 in high school, so he got drafted. And I convinced him, rather than go to the Army for 2 years, join the Marine Corps for 4 years. And he did. His mother and father wouldn't speak to me after that, but, only kidding. But so he did, and we went through boot camp together, and that was basically our buddy system.
Okay. So you mentioned boot camp. One of the interviews that I did previously was with Mike Volo, rest in peace. Mike, when I was prepping for his interview, I watched a video of recruits arriving at Parris Island in the middle of the night. And I have to tell you, when I finished that thing, I think I had a headache, and I wasn't even there. So tell me, what was it like for you in those first hours that you arrived, and what was that like?
Very scary. A lot of yelling, a lot of screaming. But it was, thinking back of what they were trying to do, it was to eliminate any human aspect part of you and to start you in the form of training and listening to commands, even though you didn't understand what they might be. So it was the first couple of days was sleep deprivation. Minimum, they fed us, but it was all this point of getting rid of any civilian aspect of you and starting that process of becoming a Marine.
I remember watching the movie Full Metal Jacket. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
No, that drill instructor, I can't remember that actor's name, but he was terrific. Was that accurate?
Yes. That was probably the most accurate of any boot
Okay.
camp. And back then, they had no barriers as far as language or physical contact with recruits. That was just part of what the training was.
So was your DI as colorful as the guy in Full Metal Jacket?
Very much so. He might have watched a movie or knew Lee Emery, who was the DI.
That's his name,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, and Lee Emery was a Marine too. So,
Right. So coming out of high school, I mean, obviously, Marine boot camp is the toughest, they say. And were you in pretty good physical shape when you left high school?
I was. I only I weighed 115 pounds, and you had to weigh at least 117 to get in. So my recruiter says wear a heavy pair of boots or put some rolled up coins in your pockets so that you'll get in. I did that. In fact, I borrowed Ronnie D'Ambrosio's work boots that he had just to make it heavier.
Well, you were bound and determined to get in.
Yes, I was.
Okay. So if you had to think of some interesting memories from boot camp, what comes to mind?
What one time was during our free time, we were supposed to be cleaning our rifles, and I left my rifle on my bunk, and my best buddy Ronnie D'Ambrosio turned me into the drill instructor because that was what you were supposed to do. So I got up have to do like 100 jumping jacks instead of taking a break time.
Okay.
One of them, yeah. And the rifle range, I had never fired a weapon in my life before I went into boot camp. And they taught you everything that you needed to know. And I qualified. I was only a marksman, but I qualified. And that was, probably a true highlight of accomplishments.
What weapon did you qualify on?
I'm 14.
14. Okay, that was before the M16. Then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they say that in the Marine Corps, when you go to boot camp, they break you down totally and then rebuild you into a fighting machine that's going to follow orders. Is that
Correct.
That's pretty true, huh?
Very true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mentally, physically, the whole 9 yards.
Yes. And spiritually. They made sure that you, on Sunday mornings, you attended some type of service, whatever your religion was, and quote unquote, if you were an atheist, they still made you go and have a chaplain service.
Interesting. Okay. So you end up being, your MOS ended up to be 6511 Aviation Ordnance.
Yes.
So did you after boot camp, you probably went to advanced training for that, correct?
Correct.
Where was that done?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. Tell me about that. What was that like?
It was basically learning all about bombs, weapons, ammunition, anything to do with air support of troops. And we got to jump off, improvised ships, because if we were going to be on a aircraft carrier or something, we got into going into an ejection seat just to give you those feelings of what it was like. So that was pretty interesting.
So how long was that training? Advanced training?
About 3 months.
Okay. So where are we chronologically now after boot camp, after advanced training?
After advanced training, then we were going to staging battalion because I had orders to Vietnam.
Okay.
And that was out in Camp Pendleton, California, in November that I had went out there.
So you mentioned earlier that you really weren't thinking about the war, but now you know you're going.
Right.
Was your mindset a little bit different at that point?
It was. And everything was on television at that time, some of the, the horrors of it and everything. So I was nervous, but I had confidence because of the way I was instructed and the way the Marine Corps did prepare you for this. And when we got out into staging battalion out in Camp Pendleton, we actually went through, it was called escape and evasion. And they put you in a situation where you had to escape, and if you got caught, you were quote unquote tortured, and to give you that whole experience. It was very, very lifelike in preparation for that. Knowing that we were right around Los Angeles, I always knew like I could get out of here, but in your mindset, you knew what it could be like if you were ever captured.
Okay, so it sounds like the whole training aspect, all 3 stages for you in the Marine Corps, was what you expected. You were ready.
I was ready.
Okay, so did you fly to Vietnam or did you go by ship?
Well, when we were out, at that time, they were sending a lot of troops over by ship and flying. And for about 2 weeks, we would get the scuttlebutt. Oh, you're going by ship. And if we went by ship, it would take us 2 weeks to get there. And by plane, it would be less than 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to go by ship. And so I think my prayers are answered. But that made me get there 2 weeks earlier. And so we flew Braniff Airlines out of California, San Francisco, and landed in Okinawa. And from Okinawa, we went over to Vietnam.
All military on the plane? No civilians?
No civilians.
So what was the mood like on the plane on the way over?
Kind of somber.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was my first time ever flying, too. So I was kind of anxious about that. But overall, it was there wasn't much, excitement or anything. And we landed in Hawaii, and in our full battle gear, going to Okinawa. But they wouldn't let us out of. We were in a confined area, of course. And one of the things I brought and I wanted to share with you is I sent my grandmother a postcard from Hawaii. When we landed there in Honolulu. And I still have that. When she passed away, she had kept it over all those years, and I have that. So that was, interesting.
So how did your family feel when you left? Did you have to leave after your advanced training after you got your orders for Vietnam? You had to leave.
We had to leave, yeah.
So what was the family reaction?
It was pretty low-keyed.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, my dad passed away when I was a sophomore in high school, so my mother kind of raised us kids. And she was, very calm. She was nervous, but she didn't confront me with, why did you do this, or why are you going? In fact, she was very supportive.
So you were stationed at Da Nang.
Right.
Did you fly directly to Da Nang, or was there a stop in Vietnam on the way to Da Nang?
No, it was directly from Okinawa to Da Nang.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when that plane door opened and you stepped out, what was that like? What was your first impression of the country?
It wasn't very hot or anything, and I expected it to be like a jungle situation, mm-hmm. but it was very mountainous from what I was seeing coming off of the plane. And there were, sort of like boot camp, because there were people there. You had your orders where you were going, and then they had people that took you right from that spot to where you were. We went to headquarters battalion and then got dispersed from there.
Okay. So Da Nang is in the northern part of Vietnam, right on the coast. It's what's in what was known as I Corps. The country was divided militarily in 4 sections. This is I Corps. So that was, like you said, mountainous. What was the air base? Tell me about the Da Nang air base itself. From what I understand, it was large. It was big.
It was, yes.
Okay.
The Air Force had the majority of it, and the Marine Corps had a lesser part of it because they had bases in Chulai and other areas. But there was, constant, jets flying out and in all of the time. And about 5 miles from us, it was called Marble Mountain. and that was a helicopter squadron. So we also supplied them with ammunition, and at times would fly with them up north, like Phu-Bai, Dong Han. That was the farthest up north I ever went.
Okay. So what were the first few days like after you got there? What did you do?
Started right in, first they put me what we called was a bomb dump, and where the ships, you would get bombs that came off of the ships, and you would put fuses and fins on them and get them ready and send them to the flight line. That was, you worked probably 12 hours a day, and they were putting out an enormous amount of ordnance every single day. And the first, within the first couple of, it wasn't even 2 weeks, I don't recall now, but that we got, mortared, and some of the guys that had been there, they says, "Welcome to Vietnam," and because that was you always heard that frantic call of incoming, and you got to go and get into the place where you called protection,
Okay.
a bunker.
I read a little bit about that air base, and I find it ironic that the French originally had it. Then during World War II, the Japanese took it over. The United States bombed the Japanese there, and then the United States took it over during this war, and we're bombing North Vietnam and South Vietnam. It's interesting the way history twists and turns. But anyway, so you were in the Marine Air Group 11.
Yes.
What was the mission of Marine Air Group 11?
It was a support mission because I was in Marine Group 11, but I was in MABS 11, which was Air Base. And that was, truly supplying bombs and ammunition to the planes. We didn't do anything on the flight deck at all. We were actually a little bit of ways from the main base because of the bombs and everything.
Okay. So, typical day. From the time you woke up in the morning, what was that? Tell me what you did. Average day.
Average day, we'd get up, we'd have morning muster, which was just to give us direction what was going to be during the day. Many times your duties changed. You might be doing a couple of things one day, and then the next day we were also put on perimeter watch. So in those times, that's what you knew what you were going to be doing during the day. And it was basically, I didn't do as much ordnance as, other things that they had me doing. I was working with heavy equipment, being on perimeter watch. So they had you doing wherever they happened to need you the most.
Okay. So what was it? Living conditions, I'd say, I've interviewed some of the other guys who were in the field, out in the bush all the time. You were on an air base. What was the difference in living conditions?
We had tents. There were boarded tents. So, I wasn't out in the bush, and I didn't have that part of life there. But we were sort of always readily exposed because of the amount of planes that were there and things that could be readily hit. And they would always aim right at bomb dumps because they knew if they hit them that, they would do a lot of damage. So.
So you got there in January of '67.
Yes.
How long did it take before you went through one of those rocket attacks or mortar attacks?
It was within the first 2 weeks.
Okay. What was that like?
Very scary, very scary. And it always happened at night. And so you'd grab whatever you had. We'd grab, rifle, helmet, and run into the bunkers. And that was pretty scary because you could hear everything coming in, thumping around, and just, praying that it would stop. And it was pretty frightful.
Anybody get hurt?
Yeah, we had some guys that were on the way to a bunker, or they were out in the field trying to get to a bunker. We had casualties. Had a couple of guys right in our unit that got killed over.
You lose any friends of yours?
I'll say that acquaintances more than friends. Yeah.
Okay. So, other than being in ordnance, did you have any other combat experiences?
Like I said, we did a lot. They put you wherever you needed. I was working on heavy equipment too, and you had to travel throughout the whole Da Nang area to try to get things to keep your equipment running because we didn't have them. But maybe another unit had it, or you could bargain with the Air Force because the Air Force had pretty much everything. So I did a lot of on the outskirts of Da Nang, trying to scrounge things up to keep our equipment going.
Stealing stuff?
Yeah,
For your own use?
just about.
So what sort of weapon did you carry?
M14.
M14.
We did get M16s. I think it was around August or September of '67, and we actually had to go out, while we fam fired them, and got used to using them. So it was that was sort of a change because you were so readily trained with the 14, and the 16 was basically the same but different.
I know I've heard a lot of stories about the M16, and a lot of the guys felt that it was like a toy gun compared to the M14.
M14, it was so different and light and firepower. You had much more firepower with that.
So, when's the first time you had to fire it at the enemy in a firefight?
Probably within a month that I was there.
Tell me about the first time that happened.
We were on a perimeter at night, and we got right outside of the base. It was called Dog Patch. It was a village, and we were always getting sniper attacks from at that point. So we would, defending our position, fire back. And it's at nighttime. You're looking at flashes of muzzle velocity and things, and trying to fire back at them. That was, the first time, and it was like, this isn't a rifle range anymore. You're actually shooting at somebody. But you did it, and again, because I think it's human instinct of survival. Someone trying to overtake you.
This happened a lot for you?
Yes, yeah.
What was the worst one?
The Tet Offensive.
Okay, so we're into January '68, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I know at that point, aside from these firefights, the base was bombed heavily as well. So tell me what that was like during Tet.
I was actually supposed to be going home in the first part of January. And when Tet started, they stopped off flights out of country and put people where they needed it. So I remember writing my mom a letter saying I'll be home like in 2 weeks. And that was in the beginning of January, because plan was go to San Francisco, go through your whatever you had to do there, and then fly home. And so after that, I didn't even write letters because nothing was leaving country. We weren't getting any mail in country either. So I felt, so upset for my mom because I would get letters from her almost every single day, a short note. And just thinking of what she was going through because, they showed so much. We got rocketed, mortared. We had a 120 millimeter rocket land in front of our hut and never went off. It stuck in the ground.
Wow.
So we were blessed.
Yes.
Very blessed.
How did you manage to deal with that? I mean, obviously, Marines are prepared. You said the training was terrific, but how did you manage to cope with the stress of all that and the fright?
I did a lot of praying before I left Vietnam, my grandmother gave me a statue of our Blessed Mother, and that my father had when he was in World War II. And I carried that with me, not as a good luck charm. I was brought up Catholic. I was an altar boy till I was a junior in high school, and I truly believed in our religion. So I prayed. I prayed the rosary. Whenever we had a chaplain, a service, I made sure somehow I would get there, because I felt that was, very, very important, to receive the Eucharist and Holy Communion. So if something were to happen, I felt like God would take care of me. And he did. And his mother did.
So were you wounded at any point?
No, I had a gas explosion go off, and it affected my ear. I had the gasoline explode, and it landed on me. So I had hearing loss, and I did write I brought a letter, just some of the memorabilia that I had, and so that you could see it. And I mentioned it in that letter that that's what happened. And this was in December, and but I went and had it evaluated. They took me to an aid station, and they did say that I had, probably permanent hearing loss. But I was never wounded, shot,
Okay.
like that.
Well, that's good. What were holidays like for you over there? Christmas, Thanksgiving?
Just another day.
Really?
Another
Did
day.
they feed you, though?
No.
Nothing special?
No.
No turkey?
No turkey. I remember Christmas in '67. They had a ceasefire, right? And so we had gotten a pallet of beer from somebody stole, and we were going to have a little party, and that night we got rocketed. So that was so much for the, ceasefire.
So getting back to the Tet Offensive, you mentioned that was the worst time. Were there any? I'm assuming that these were all NVA, North Vietnamese Army.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Did they get through the wire at all? Did they actually infiltrate the base at any point?
They did, and it was right around the bomb dump, because they had to know what we had, in that area. They had anything from a 250-pound to a 2,000-pound bomb. They had napalm, so that was all being stored there. And we had the Air Force also had dogs that would do perimeter watch with us. So they put just about anyone in that had a weapon. You almost had to stop what you were doing otherwise and be out on those areas.
So you were fighting these guys who were trying to infiltrate. That had to be a scary, scary thing to go through.
That, for me, that was the scariest part, because I was thinking, I made it through, 12 months, and now these are the last 3 months. So I was there for another whole month and came back on February 9th.
So you're a short timer, and here,
Yes.
Tet Offensive, and you're wondering, am I going to get out of here alive?
Yes.
How close did you come?
There was just so much going on, so much chaos, because of so much attacks and not knowing where you're going. There were, so much trying to get more types of ammunition up north to the people too. So we were involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. Is there one particular day or moment that was really, really a nightmare for you?
Probably January or July 15th. We got a heavy rocket attack and mortar attack, which was the worst had been. We would get, they would just be lopping mortars in, but this was one of the heaviest attacks. We lost, there was, I think it was, from what I understand, like 20 guys, and we lost 3 in our particular unit, and there was a lot of wounded casualties. And my friend Ronnie D'Ambrosio was stationed in 1st Anti-Tank Battalion, which was just north of us. And he came down the next day and he said, we didn't know if you guys are going to be alive down here, because the way they were rocketing and mortaring. And on their patrol, they had seen the North Vietnamese coming down on boats and unloading rockets, and they requested fire upon them, and they were denied. They said, you sit and watch them. So they sat and watched, because that's the way the war was, and, launch all of these rockets and mortars. And, he came down, he goes, man, I'm just glad, you guys didn't get what we thought you were going to get.
Right. Crazy stuff. So throughout that whole period you were there, which I guess was what, 13 months?
13 months. Yeah.
Did you get a leave during that time?
They sent me. Normally, you would get R&R duty, but we didn't because of our MOS and everything. So they sent us to an aerial mine school in Okinawa for 3 days. We got there, we checked into the class, and checked out within a half an hour time. The guy just says, "You're done, go." So we got to. I did get up to. We went up to Hiroshima, to Peace Park. Those are pretty memorable times too. I remember watching in a hotel with one of my buddies, Bonanza, and it was in Japanese or whatever. Like, what are we doing here?
Ross Cartwright speaking Japanese.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
That had to be hilarious. Yeah. How about the beaches? China Beach, all that. You never got over the coast?
I never got over there.
Really?
No.
The name was right there.
Yeah, and it used to be that was in country R&R.
Right.
I never got over there.
Did they at least give you some beers?
Oh, we had some beers. Yeah, they would. Like I said, there was people that would drive forklifts and lift up, barbed wire and come out with a pallet of beer. Kept us happy.
So when you were there, I know a lot of the protests of the Vietnam War were mostly 69, 70, but there was some things going on. Did you hear what was going on in the United States about being an unpopular war? How did that impact you?
It made us very angry, me included, because of we're over there, defending our country or doing what our country wanted us to do.
Yeah.
And to see those reactions, and then we had people that, we call them new guys coming in and describing everything that they were going through and trying to get, through the country on airplanes and everything. And it wasn't, back then you had to travel in uniform. You couldn't travel in civilian clothes.
Yeah, so they couldn't hide.
They couldn't, no, we couldn't hide.
Yeah. So did you buy into the theory of that you were serving there to save the Vietnamese people from communism? Was that in your head at all?
It was, I don't know how much I bought into it. It was more or less that, I enlisted in the Marine Corps and I was doing what I was told to do. Mm-hmm. And we have a saying, ours is not a question why, ours is only to do or die. And I think we carry that with us.
So how did that whole Vietnam experience impact you mentally, physically?
It had a great impact, and but in many ways it helped me out because I was able to do things that I probably wouldn't have done without the discipline that I had to have, and knowing that I could do things that I didn't think I could do before because of the training and what they instill in you.
Like, for instance?
Go to college. Mm. I think I was 178 out of 182 in our class because I didn't care. I wanted to go into the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting you say that because when I was in college, I remember being in class and there were several from time to time, different classes. There were Vietnam veterans in class, and they were the best students. I'll never forget that. Some of them even had the green jacket on and everything, but they were the best students. They were serious, they were dedicated, and they were ignoring all the the partying we were doing, and there were demonstrations on campus, all that stuff. They ignored all that. They were pretty good. They were really good students. So it's interesting that you say that. But I want to get back to when you came home, well, when you were finally left, how did that? Explain to me how that all worked out for you.
It was
February of
in
'68.
February. Yeah, I mean, Tet was still going on, and we were able to get, got our orders, and they took us over to the air base, and got on that plane, and I'll never forget. I mean, it was just a big, loud scream that went on. It seemed like it lasted for a half an hour, and it was Braniff Airlines, and all of the stewardesses all had mini skirts on and those psychedelic, uniforms, and they took good care of us. They were very good to us. I have to say that.
You flew into California again?
No, we flew into Okinawa, and then from Okinawa, we flew to San Francisco.
Okay. So what was it like getting off the plane?
It was interesting, very interesting.
Explain, please.
Well, again, you've got, when we landed in Okinawa, we had to make sure our uniforms were plastic, and any, ribbons or anything that you were awarded to, you had on, because you were representing the Marine Corps in your country. So when we got off and in San Francisco, and we're going to go and catch our flights out, people were just very rude. Look at you in different ways, give you obscene gestures, shout at you, call you names, and you just kind of stood back and said, "Wow, this isn't very good," But in fact, I think for me, it kind of made me stand up taller and just say, I did this for you, whether you'd realize it or not.
Did you want to grab somebody and punch them?
Probably. Yeah, there was a lot of anger, a lot of anger. But on the other hand, there were people that were very kind to you too. I went up to buy my ticket at the counter, and the person says, I want to go to New York, and they says, well, we have a plane leaving right now, but it's pulling away from the gate. So they said, wait a minute. They brought the plane back to the gate and allowed me to get onto the plane, and so they took me down into the center section of the plane, and just before it was ready to take off again, they brought me up and put me in first class.
Holy
So
smokes.
that was, I said, for all the bad stuff, there's always a good side to things too.
That's the first time I've ever heard that said about.
Yeah. So I got to New York, right, that was a good deal.
So you served from '66 to 1970.
Yes.
And you got back to the States in '68. What were the next 2 years like? What did you do?
I did a lot of things. Again, it wasn't just, you got an MOS, but it really didn't mean anything. They sent me up to a physical training school in Quantico, Virginia for 4 months. And I came back and I was helping do physical training for the guys that were on base. And I had a master sergeant who was with me over in Vietnam, and he had recommended me for one of the awards I got. And he wanted me to re-enlist. And he told me, he said, I can get you into officer candidate school as a warrant officer, and you'll have the best of both worlds. You won't have the shit of an enlisted man, but you don't have the responsibility of an officer. But I knew they would send me back, and I just couldn't do it. I said, I made it. And because they were rotating you back just about after a year and a half. But because I got that special assignment to Quantico, I got kept a little bit longer.
Okay. So you, when you came out, you were a sergeant.
Yes.
Was your high school. What's the progression? And help me understand. How do you go from being a recruit to sergeant? What's it take?
It's all based on merit. We didn't take any exams. I think today they take exams, but it was based on your performance. So I made E3 Lance Corporal when I was in Vietnam, and then I made Corporal as well. And then when I got back to the States, I was promoted to Sergeant E5.
You mentioned awards. Any medals? Tell me about those.
I did get it. It was a Navy Achievement Medal with Combat V for meritorious action that I was involved in around Da Nang for all the time I was over there.
So that encompassed the whole experience
Yes.
at
Yeah.
Da Nang. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you got out, or once you got home, rather, I assume you saw your family. What was that like?
That was wonderful. They had a big sign in front of our house. Some of the guys on the street were home on leave. I lived on South Washington Street in Herkimer. So we met at the Polish Club in Herkimer. I lived right next door. But we landed at Oneida County Airport. And my mom was there. My uncle Maynard, who was in the Navy, Maynard Blask, he was there.
Coach Blask. Coach Blask.
Coach Blask, yeah. So it was truly a heartwarming, scene. It was probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning that we finally got home.
Okay. So, did your friends or family ask you what it was like, what you had gone through, how it impacted you? Did they talk about it? Was it discussed?
Not much, because I wasn't at that point really willing to share a lot. It was a big period of adjustment, and I kept things in because I didn't want to seem vulnerable or weak. And for many, many years, I did that, and it got to a point where I just really decided I need some help. And I think being a physical therapist, I was, people said, well, why did you choose physical therapy? I didn't know what physical therapy was when I got out of the Marine Corps. But in my head, it was like I had enough of destruction. I want to be able to help people. And we would help, again, unload wounded people over in Da Nang when they would come in from the bush and things. So it was just wanting to do something for somebody. And that kind of set the tone in my life.
So physical therapy was therapy for you?
It was. Very good, yes.
Okay. So it sounds like you kept this inside all those years, and it changed you as a person, do you think?
Yes.
In what way?
I didn't want to really deal with it, so I spent I put a lot of time and effort into my, career, working, 8 to 10 hours a day. That was, so I didn't have to think. And then I'd get home and I was doing home stuff, so, but as time went on, I was just having more and more, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, overreaction to things. And I'm thinking, this isn't good.
So it's kind of built up over time then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any particular experience from Vietnam that came back to haunt you? Do you have nightmares or any of the things that people with PTSD go through?
Yeah, the whole bombing, the mortaring, the rocketing, the firefights, and being in bunkers. I never realized how it affected me being confined and being claustrophobic. And some things would be happening when, I was in a very tight space, but I didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden I got, one night I had a real bad nightmare because I was in this little crawl space in my cellar working in and out of it. And it was just like being in a bunker. You would go into those bunkers and there would be snakes or rats. And, you're trying to hide and they're crawling on you and stuff. And it seems to be over time more and more. Fireworks never did bother me until a couple of years ago, and I've had some bad experiences with that too. But
Did you need the VA for anything?
I did about 5 years ago, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, hearing loss, and so when I went, I wasn't looking for money compensation because what they give you is nothing. But I needed help, and that's what I wanted to do. So after I saw my psychiatrist, he, set me up with a social worker, counselor, and she changed my life. She was just unbelievable.
So how do you
very
feel now
helpful.
about the whole experience? Any differently?
It added to my life, and I think that's what life is about to me. People are put in your life for certain reasons. Things happen in your life for certain reasons, and because of what happened in Vietnam, I was able to have better control over situations, and not become despaired, especially in my work. You know, I think it had more of an effect on my family than it did at work because that was, again, I was in control. But at home, it was, just I would get too anxious, get at the least little thing, get very angry, and but I'm so much better at that now. I do owe it to my first counselor. She was just great.
So let's go back to, if we could, the politics of Vietnam. We pull out in 73. And of course in 75, the communists took over South Vietnam. After everything that you went through, how did that make you feel?
Sort of disheartening,
Mm-hmm.
because of, the guys, over 58,000 men and women lost their lives. And you still have over 1,580 people unaccounted for, prisoner of war. That was, that was the very hard part of it. But I think the relationships that a veteran has now with, especially in Vietnam guys, it's like a brotherhood. It didn't matter if you were Army, Navy, Coast Guard, anybody. You were there, you fought, and it was just it's a true brotherhood. It really is.
Have you been to the wall in
Yes.
Washington? Yeah.
Yes, that's very, very moving to me. Been twice, and when I was home on leave just before going over, Brian Burdick, a classmate of mine, he was over in country for 2 weeks and got killed. And I remember him coming back to Herkimer. There was no fanfare, there was no parade, there was nothing. And he was buried at St. Francis de Sales Church, and it was just like this 19-year-old guy just, got killed. And how can nobody even care, other than family and friends?
Yeah. Totally different from World War II.
Right, and after Desert Storm, and not taking it away from those things because those guys went there in battle too, but just not a lot of respect.
That's one of the things that I always found interesting. It's one of the reasons why I started doing these interviews, because it seems like in the last 5 or 10 years, guys like you have gotten more attention, and they're more willing to come forward and talk about their experience. Although I will say that probably maybe only 60% of the people I asked to do an interview like this actually did, because some of them they just couldn't do it. And I totally understood that. But it just seems like in the last several years you've come forward, and it seems to, and I think you told me this when we talked on the phone, that it helps you to talk about it. And if people like you had done this sooner, maybe they would have been better off. I don't know.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, and there are some people that just don't want to, but for their own personal reasons. But I think we have a group of guys, in Herkimer and Little Falls that do get together, Vietnam veterans, and we're not there to tell war stories. We're there because of us. Mm-hmm. And that it's so heartwarming. It's like a comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And it's taken a long time to happen because even between veterans, nobody wanted to say anything.
Well, a lot of them wouldn't even admit they were there.
Right.
They didn't want the hassle.
Yeah.
They had enough stress. They didn't want to add to it.
Yeah. What was it like? Did you ever kill anybody? It's like, come on.
Anybody ask you that?
Oh, yeah.
What's it like to shoot at somebody?
Yeah.
What was your
What's it
answer?
like? I would try to dodge it. I would just yeah.
Just didn't want to talk about it.
No. It's, it's,
Yeah.
it's past. So,
Yeah. Getting back to Vietnam, and obviously Agent Orange was a huge issue. Being on the base, maybe you were not exposed to that. I don't know. What's...
Da Nang was actually, if you look in records, the highest concentration of Agent Orange because of the amount of foliage that they used that was to kill around the base.
Okay.
And plus, they were actually mixing it at the base too, and the ground was saturated for a period of time with it. Okay. I have been blessed, and I truly mean that. I do have one medical problem that they're trying to find out what's going on, but they can't seem to identify. But as far as some of my friends who have been affected by Agent Orange and stuff, and then for having the government deny that any of this actually happened, that was disheartening. Yeah. It wasn't until 1983 that they actually classified PTSD for Vietnam veterans. So you're talking almost 10 years of guys trying to get help but couldn't because the VA wouldn't take them.
Terrible.
It was, and I had a couple of friends that commit suicide because they just couldn't do it anymore.
Pretty sad situation.
Yes.
What would you like people to remember about the war?
Those people that sacrificed, that gave the ultimate sacrifice, men, women that died for our country, but also the guys that came back wounded mentally and physically, that people just didn't reach out to or care for. I think it's important that we recognize those people.
Any advice to young people about war and service in the future?
I think service is a good opportunity for people. I think for some people they need to have discipline, they need to have character, and it's not something that you don't have. It's something that people bring out of you, and I think that's that's really important for people to do.
Would you recommend the Marine Corps?
Of course.
Thought you'd say that.
Yes.
Well, this has been terrific, but is there anything else that you'd like to say that we haven't touched on? Any message, anything else that you want to say about your own personal life and what you went through?
Like I said, when I got out and started, going to college, I started at Herkimer Community College, graduated in 73, got accepted at Upstate Medical Center in physical therapy, and they were only taking 16 students at the time. But I said they probably needed a veteran there to kind of equate them out. But so after that, when I started my career, because of my background of leadership, I never worked under another therapist. I was always by myself at different hospitals between Herkimer, Ilion, and Little Falls. And I felt that was very beneficial. Mm-hmm. And it made me also just realize how much faith is important in true healing, because I'm not the person that heals. It's God that does that. And we invoke him on that. So
that's a really good message.
It is.
Yeah, well, I appreciate everything you did. I went to see you a few times and various issues I had, and I thought you were terrific, so I thank you for that. And again, I thank you for your service, and I really appreciate you doing this, because I know it's not always easy to talk about. So thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
and
it.
I admire you and Dave for doing this for veterans, because I think it, especially the Vietnam guys, I think it's a good opportunity to say, you're recognized. Not that we want the big pat on the back, but it's just that, we did our time too. So, well,
as you and I talked, I think the other value in it is creating the record. It's a historical record, and for future family members or family members now who may not have heard the stories, who are interested. I remember one interview we did. Dave and I got an email from the son of one of the veterans I interviewed, and he was thrilled that he finally heard his father talk about his experience.
Yeah.
And that choked me up.
Yeah.
Chokes me up right now.
Yeah. No.
So I thank you for that. And if there's anybody that you know who would like to come in and do this, and when I first did it, it was limited to Little Falls, but I'm willing to do anyone in the Mohawk Valley, whether it's Frankfort, Fort Plain, Canajoharie, Herkimer, Mohawk, wherever. If you know anyone who would like to come in and do this, I'd be more than happy. Have them contact me, and we'll set this up.
Okay.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching, and hope to see you again.